Hello, good afternoon. The title is Anko to Jetpack Compose, Line Sticker Maker's Technical Debt Resolution. Now I would like to begin. First of all, for this session, what I want to communicate to you first is what we learned from our migration experience from Anko to Jetpack Compose. Second, why do we need to migrate? And third, how important is it to make a clear migration plan if migration is inevitable, yet we don't want to affect users negatively? Here's the agenda. Introduction of Line Sticker Maker, tech stack and technology debt, migration plan, obstacles we face during migration and resolutions, and release strategy. Let me introduce myself. From Line Fukuoka app team, I'm an Android engineer. I'm responsible for two projects, Line Wallet and Line Sticker Maker. So Line Stamp is a service where users can make the stamp and stickers very casually, and a various editor tool is available in the app. So from the creation to sales, all of the processes can be completed in a single app. Line Sticker Maker was launched in 2017 as Line Creator Studio, and then it has supported users' sticker creation by adding various editing functions over time. And in 2021, the product was renamed Line Sticker Maker in collaboration with Line Avatar, and is now looking for delivering even more diverse sticker creation experience to its users. The Sticker Maker app team is developing these technologies for Android. Android app is developed fully on Kotlin while actively adopting new technologies, Anko layout, RxJava, Realm, Retrofit, AAK, HTTP, and so forth. But Anko may not be familiar to all of you. I asked many of my friends whether they know this or not. Many of them said no. Then, Anko layout, what is it? It is a Kotlin DSL based Android library. As the name suggests, it's a library. So let's take a look at the code. So if you want to define a linear layout, you first write the linear layout in Kotlin DSL. And you can also set the layout attributes such as IDs and backgrounds. And then if you want to place a child view, you can write the child view in the scope of the parent and specify attributes such as text and style as well. And if you want to define a user interaction, simply write onClick or others in the scope of the target view as shown here and pass the function. You can also define the presentation logic in the layout in this way. So the Anko layout was first adopted for development because of several advantages. First, it has good performance because it defines views without XML. Second, you can flexibly incorporate presentation logic into UI. And since it is written in Kotlin, you can take advantage of Kotlin's control flow. Finally, it is more flexible than XML. Anko layout is something that the Android engineer has been looking for. In fact, this Anko layout was deprecated in 2019. Of course, this is quite a shocking fact for the team at the time. But the team at the time decided to continue using it. And now, 2 years later, today, it has become, as you might expect, a complete technical debt. And what kind of technical debt? First, Anko layout does not have a UI preview like XML or Compose. So you have to imagine it by looking at the Kotlin DSL or actually deploy it. And then there is the maintenance cost issue. Since Anko layout is a wrapper for the Android support library, it would be fine to update the version of Anko layout as the Android support library is updated. However, that work has to be done internally by the team after it is deprecated. So gap has to be narrowed. It is expanding. Finally, it is also a barrier to entry for newcomers. Few people have been heard of Anko layout, let alone developed it. It is a burden for new members to learn. So why did we decide to continue using Anko layout? Actually, when it was deprecated, we did consider migrating to Jetpack Compose. However, at that time, Jetpack Compose was still in its infancy and we didn't have the resources to migrate within the team. After the stable release of Jetpack Compose last year, we have finally decided to perform migration because the team with the additional resources is now ready to take up the challenge. Now that Anko layout has become a complete technical debt, migration must be done sooner or later. This task is not a feature implementation for the user, but entirely for the developer. In other words, it could be described as a task to improve the developer experience. However, migration requires rewriting the existing code base, and its side effect may affect the users.
It's a result. It's a retrofit for the developer experience, but if it affects the user experience, it's complete disaster. To prevent this from happening, it is important to have a proper plan in place beforehand. And now that was the preamble, and we finally get down to the main topic. I will explain how we actually migrated. The first step is to establish the goal. This is a team-wide task, so it is important to clarify the goal from the very beginning. The most important goal we wanted to achieve is to replace Anko with a Jetpack Compose. So we want to minimize refactoring of legacy code and not to spend too much time on UI performance adjustments. We share this within the entire team. With this goal in mind, each member implements and conducts code review to achieve the same goal and maintain a sense of team solidarity. The migration plan is divided into 4 phases: implementation, release, deletion, and improvement. These are different goals. There are different goals for each phase. The first 2 phases, to implement the same UI in Compose, conduct QA, and release it to the users. Let's take a look at how the process works. Line Sticker Maker Android is a feature-based multi-module repository. Each feature has its own module and depends only on shared modules. On top of this, we first created a module called Common UI, which is a module for storing common UI components, styles, and typography for the entire app. Then, because the feature modules are independent, they can be migrated in parallel. In fact, we are constantly migrating 2 or 3 modules at a time. However, after a closer look at the actual code base, we discovered another problem. Major problems were fragment navigation, mixed layers, and the use of custom Android view. Let me explain one by one. Let's start with fragment. In Android, it is very common to use multiple fragments in an activity for screen navigation. And we also use many fragments. But with Compose, it is possible to eliminate the concept of fragments. With Navigation Compose, it is possible by preparing composable by screen. But is that method really suitable for us? So, we decided to leave it. The reason was to migrate to Navigation Compose. The fragment structure had to be deleted all at once, and we decided that it would be difficult to migrate step by step. We also had to rebuild the existing structure from scratch, including data handover between fragments, and we expected the workload to increase. Therefore, we decided to keep the fragment structure and rewrite only the view in the fragment to Compose. This allowed us to work on each screen at a time, making it easier to ensure quality and behavior while maintaining the speed. Furthermore, the composable views created at this stage can be reused in future Compose navigation improvements. Next, mixing of layer. But first, take a look at this. These were benefits of Anko layout mentioned earlier. Actually, there is a trap. Yes, you can write presentation logic in the UI. Presentation logic in the UI. It is not a problem in itself. However, because of writing in Kotlin, we sometimes end up writing in such a way that we directly access the data layer from within the UI. Thus, there were many implementations in the legacy code that access data from Anko layout definition classes to multiple data providers and updated the UI. The data layer is not clearly separated from the UI layer, making it difficult to replace the UI implementation. So, some refactoring is needed. This is another graph that Android engineers will be familiar with, but between this data layer and the UI, we need an intermediary to bring the data together. This time, we decided to use Android view model to fulfill that role. Thus, from an architecture where Anko had direct access to multiple data providers, by sandwiching the view model, the UI implementation no longer depends on the data layer. On the code, a model representing the state of the UI from the view model is exposed as a state flow, subscribe and update in view. Up to this point was preparation. Our goal is to replace the UI implementation with Compose. Once ready, it is ready to replace it by creating the same UI in Compose. But we have added one more guarantee to make sure: the feature flag. Feature flag allows you to switch which UI implementation to use. Let's take a look at the previous code. Once again, this is in the onCreateView function of fragment, and the return value is the view to be rendered.
One feature flag is inserted here. Flag whether to use Compose or not. And we also defined the Compose view to be returned to receive the UI data of the same view model. So thus, while maintaining the structure of the conventional structure of activity fragment and Anko view, it is now possible to switch only view position as needed. A debug configuration menu like this would allow switching between implementations. At runtime, developers can easily compare behaviors. There is no need to compare multiple builds during the QA phase. This solves the mixed layer problem. Finally, let's discuss the issue of custom Android views. Line's sticker maker uses a large number of custom Android views. We implemented various Android views mainly for functions such as image editing, cropping, and so forth. These views are complex, and recreating them in Compose is no easy task. But we cannot afford to spend a lot of time on this, so we tried to implement them using the compatibility API. For example, we have a composable function like this one. Let's give the bitmap and the matrix needed to display the image to the function. Here, let's use the compatible API called Android View Composable and instantiate the view with the factory block. Inside the update Compose view, we can use the Android. As you can see on the screen, the root menu bar and title bar, these are implemented in Compose, and only the image cropping part uses Android view. It is quite easy. Well, that's what I wanted to say. Unfortunately, it was not that easy actually. When we actually applied it, we discovered many problems. First of all, there is a mismatch in view events. Let's take a look at the sample code. There is a custom view called trimming view that is used to crop the image. Inside of it, there is a matrix that represents the initial state of the image. In the traditional Anko layout, the UI is imperative. So let's say you call a function like this to do data binding to a view. Binding the image first and binding the matrix. It's quite easy. If you are to write this in Compose using the compatible API, it would be like the trimming composable I showed you earlier. You are binding data inside the view within the update, but it didn't work as expected. After looking closely at the content of trimming view, we noticed that the one view event was overridden, which would reset the initial matrix if the size of the view is changed. In traditional Anko, the view is created first, and on-size changed is called out when it is laid out. Then the binding of the image and the matrix will be performed next. But in Compose, it looks like this. If we compare, we can find that the timing of data binding is different. Why is this? Because Compose is a declarative UI. If data is already available before the view is drawn, then binding is performed as is. Therefore, the base matrix was already set before the on-size change event, and then the on-size change reset the base matrix, which caused the image to be misaligned. To solve this problem, on-size change listener is prepared as a workaround, and a process to set the base matrix is added. Then, after the size reset, the listener is called.
With this, the order of events, we changed it in this way. Now we can keep the matrix accurate. Now, we've finally solved one problem, but there's actually one more. It's about restoring the view. More precisely, the restoration of the view's internal state. First, let's look at this. In Compose, when a composable is destroyed and redrawn, if there is data you want to use for restoration, you can use remember savable to save it. Thus, when state 2 preserved is redrawn, it can be restored with the value that was destroyed last time. Let's take a look at the trimming view mentioned earlier. Base matrix is an internal state to maintain the matrix of the initial display of the image. There is another matrix for storing transformations such as image translation, rotation, etc., which is also an internal state of the view. However, when this is used within a composed view, if the composed view is destroyed, the internal state is also lost to restore it. So, in order to restore, the view's on save instance site and on restore instance state must be properly implemented. As you can see, before view is destroyed, transform matrix must be saved in the bundle, and when view is restored, internal state also must be restored. And one more thing you need to do is to specify the ID of the view properly. If view does not have an ID, on save instance state and on restore instance state will not work well. Like this, it is not difficult to use a simple Android view in a composed view, but you should be careful when using a custom Android view like this one or an Android view with internal state. You may face unexpected behavior. So far, we've talked about the migration implementation process. Once the implementation is complete, the next step is to release it. As I said at the beginning, it is not desirable to influence users. So, it is important to plan your releases. First, each feature should be released sequentially. The combination of multi-module and feature flags allows us to easily control the scope of our releases. The goal is to minimize the scope of failure due to migration by releasing in phases. Next is outage monitoring, which is not a special topic, but part of a very common development flow. However, when an outage occurs, it is important to know how to deal with it. If outage is caused by migration, we will first determine the cause, fix it if it can be easily fixed, and release a hotfix. If we determine that there is a fundamental problem that will take some time, we can turn off the feature flag and release a hotfix that reverts to Anko layout. Sharing this kind of plan with the planner, QA, and others in advance, we probably improve their understanding. And by preparing contingency plans like this in advance, will minimize the impact on the users. So let's talk about the future. This migration doesn't mean that we're just going to release it and be done with it. Once the utility of Compose is confirmed, the next step is to remove Anko completely, which will expand the scope for refactoring. Eventually, we will also look at eliminating the fragment structure, as I mentioned earlier, from the very beginning. Let's look at our technical debt once last time. First of all, there is the problem that Anko layout does not have a preview function. This is now possible with Compose Preview by moving to Compose, and the preview parameter allows multiple UI statuses to be previewed at the same time. Next, Anko layout maintenance cost. This will be completely eliminated by moving to Compose. Furthermore, Compose itself is now in active development and has a thriving community, making it easy for developers to get involved. We hope that this will eliminate our technical debt with Anko layout. And finally, as I said at the beginning, the migration itself was inevitable, but it's important to remember how to do it. Even though the task is for the developer, it is important to remember to be user first. And you should plan first and assume the worst. It is also important to focus on the goal as a whole team. I think this is a story that can be applied to any project, not just our case. I'm sure some of you think that migration is a daunting task. Indeed it is. Trying to understand legacy codes, organizing 1,000s of lines of fragment, and stepping on a bug that had never been seen, it was quite challenging. But migration can also be a fun task because developers can use new technologies, and knowledge sharing within the team has become more active. Teaching each other traps and tips helps the team to grow. And we always enjoy challenges. It is a tough task, but that is why it is worth the challenge. This was the journey of eliminating technical debt of Line Sticker Maker. Thank you very much.
Po-san, thank you very much. Now we'd like to begin Plus Talk, and the interviewers are asking questions to the presenter to deep dive the content of the presentation. We would like to invite the audience to ask questions as well. If you have any questions, please use the question mark button on the right-hand side lower corner of the screen. Interviewers are from Yahoo Japan, Mr. Yusuke Katabuchi. Katabuchi-san, could you turn on your camera and the microphone? Katabuchi-san, could you introduce yourself just briefly? Yes, from Yahoo Japan. I'm an application engineer of the company. Thank you. Katabuchi-san, what are your questions about the presentation? Yes, in our team, there are some use of Compose as well, so it was very, very useful information, especially custom and reviews. It's very hard in our team. Things are not going so well. So I was able to empathize with you, what you were talking about. Now, my question. For the migration and the future development, you worked on both at the same time. So how much time was allocated to migration? And how many people are allocated to the migration work? Yes. For Line Sticker Maker Android team, we have a team of 4. Among the 4 members, one person is mainly doing the development of the features, and the other 3 are working on the migration of Compose mainly. Depending on the version, this can change, but basically that's the dynamics. Having said that, it's the feature development, but in Compose, we are developing new features as well. So all of the 4 members are using Compose. Thank you. So from time to time, you get the new insights and sharing those with the rest of the members of the team? Yes. As we develop, there are some bugs we face, and then we share on the Slack. And once we get some insight, on a weekly basis, we have the study session in the team. So it's not only our team members. To the client members, we are trying to share those information as much as possible and as quickly as possible. Thank you. So when you introduce a new technology, those things are very important, I think. Yes, indeed. Especially in the team using Compose. Well, there are only few members who have used it in the production environment. So as soon as possible, we wanted to experience and share the information which is not in the document with everybody. Thank you. You faced with unexpected errors. So after the release, have there been any unexpected errors, or were there any comments from the users about the poor performances? Let me think about it. Well, half of the modules, the compose of them, have been already released to the users. So far, we haven't seen any error yet, so we are very fortunate. We didn't face any major errors, so far so good. A high percentage is already migrated to Jet Compose. Yes, as I said, it's a feature module, multi-module. For each feature, the size and the other aspects are different. So about 80% to 90% is already migrated to Compose. But whatever is already released is only 50%. I see. Thank you. So after the release, you haven't faced any unexpected errors. So that means that you have very carefully tested everything. Yes, thank you very much. There seems to be some questions from the audience. Regarding feature flag, is it Fire-based? Are you using those services? Or are you directly writing onto the code? And you use hotlinks if something happens? Yes, we use the code to write, and if there are errors, we use the hotfix in order to eliminate that. So that's a practice. I see. So you haven't used the future flags for those yet? With the servers remote, we want to control from the beginning, but the server resource is not adequate. That's why we cannot do that yet. With the Jetpack Compose, what was the learning cost? With XML, compared with that, well, XML is something that everyone has been using for some time. So in terms of the learning cost, I don't think there was so much, but Compose is something completely new. So in order to learn, maybe learning cost is a little bit high. But as I said, for the Jetpack Compose, in the Android community, people are paying attention to this, and there is an active community for that. So there are abundant resources for learning, and there are guidance articles and so forth. So for learning, I think it is relatively easy to learn. Thank you. In our news app, we are using it, but the training cost, learning cost, is relatively low. That's what we felt because of the abundant resources. Yes, within the team, one person has been working on Anko layout for some time. This person is an Android engineer, and this person is now using Compose. And what this person felt is that the Compose is easier and more intuitive and easy to work with. That's what this person said. Well, when Anko layout was deprecated, maybe this person was very shocked. Yes, that's what he or she told me. So you said the learning cost is low, but from Anko to Compose, the migration work, was there any impact to the schedule of other things? Did you have to make some other projects pending? We didn't face that kind of problem. From the beginning, we were able to secure the resources for the feature development as well from the beginning. Therefore, we didn't impact the schedule of other projects. Thank you. You have coordinated the timeline very well. Yes, our team members covered up each other very well. Well, thank you. Another question. For the first time, you migrated the code. When you released, I thought that you were very careful. But from what percentage did you start with?
So that means the ratio of the users, the percentage of total users. Well, we turned it on, and then it should be 100%. I see. Thank you. Let's see. Jetpack Compose. The criteria of selecting modules, which ones to start with, migrating to Jetpack Compose. Did you have any list of criteria? Well, first of all, on an experimental basis, of course, if we want to migrate those that are not used or simple features, we selected and tried to migrate. And if we face any issues, then we share the knowledge with the members. So initially, starting with those features like setting menus, those features that are not being used often, release it. And if there's no problem, then we go to more complex modules like editing images. That will be more complex. So we have to be very prudent. So we went step by step. Thank you. The complex screens, if you try to migrate those screens, I'm sure there are a lot of unexpected things that can happen. Yes. So complicated screens. Were there any cases where it took many more man-hours than what you had planned? And especially the customer RUI that we were using. So it can lead to something that we don't expect. So maybe 1.5 to 2 times compared to initial man-hour that we had projected. Yes, you do a Jetpack Compose and then complicated screen, which means that I think we need to budget those additional man-hours. Okay, since it's time, final question, please. Okay, this is the final question from Anko to Jetpack Compose. What would you say is the biggest benefit of Jetpack Compose? Benefit. So on a personal note, it's intuitively written. It can be. And also composable, so it's reusable. So compared to Anko or XML, it's like handling library, and that's how we write UIs. and the UI that you developed, where else it is being used, what would be the application. That's what you have in mind as you create a UI. So intuitive use is the biggest benefit. Yes, being able to use it intuitively, I think that's very important. And also, it is fun to actually develop intuitively. Yes. Okay, that will be all from my end. Thank you very much.